It's time now for the award-winning #1 local talk show in Northeast Pennsylvania, The Sam Lesante Show. Now here's your host, Sam Lesante.
Well, folks, in the city of Hazleton, are you ready for the new ordinances that were passed on July the 12th at City Hall, 3 to 2? Some of them effective immediately, one starting 2013. The Chief of Police, Frank DeAndrea, said we have to have these ordinances. My guest today is the Chief of Police, Frank DeAndrea. I'm Sam Lesante. Thanks for joining us. Chief, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
A lot of interesting comments about these ordinances, primarily ordinance, which we'll discuss, ordinance 2012-16, number 16. But before we even get to this, why you being the Chief of Police, and so far we've heard, we're only hearing great things about what you're doing in the city of Hazleton. But however, this put a little snag in. Two councilmen, the people felt that they didn't want to vote for these. 3 said, let's go ahead with them. Why, anyway, did you want to come up with these ordinances?
Well, as you remember, I'm sure early in me being appointed chief, I was on the show and I was giving some of my thoughts of how I was going to change or help the city. I sit back for 3 months in the police department and I assess problem areas and look at what rules and regulations we have in place and what rules and regulations we don't even have. After that, I recognized through all of these ordinances, and there are still several ordinances that I haven't even gotten finished to get to the solicitor, to go through the mayor, to get back to city council. And they'll be forthcoming in the next month or two. But all of these ordinances address issues that the city and the police department are having. When we get to 2016, one of the largest issues that the city faces, hence the taxpayers face, is the budget deficit starting for 2013. So there's a lot of rationale behind all of these. And I'm happy to go through each one of them one by one. Sure.
Let's talk about the ordinance 15, which is 2012-15, an ordinance regulating parking within the city of Hazleton during the snow season for snow removal and or plowing, and establishing a schedule of fines for violations defined in the various classifications of said regulations. What is this?
Well, that's basically our snow parking ban. And what this does is it updates the old ordinance. And the only reason why I had to write this is because in the old ordinance, the mayor had to declare an emergency for the police department to be able to ticket and tow vehicles during a snowstorm. It doesn't make sense that this is the highest city in Pennsylvania, and we all know we have a snow season. So what this does is it changes the verbiage that the mayor doesn't have to go on the radio at 3 a.m. on December 22nd to say it's a snow emergency. If it's snowing and it's a plowable snow, the snow parking ban is in effect. You need to have your cars on the right side of the street. It just becomes more of a I say a technicality. I don't need the mayor to declare a snow emergency every time it snows. Now we have a snow season, and I believe it spells out that the snow season goes from the end of October to April 15th.
So from the end of October to April the 15th, when it's snowing out, you know the ban's in effect.
Exactly. And then what that does
no matter what kind of, whether it's a ½ inch, whether it's a ¼ inch, whether it's 12 feet.
If we're going to plow snow, exactly. And most people will recognize, oh, they're calling for a bad snowstorm. You should get used to parking in accordance with the snow parking ban in case it snows. Because again, we're the highest elevated city in the state of Pennsylvania. We get snow. So what you do is you park in accordance with that, and or you move your car if it starts to snow. That's all.
Now, will you be able to, some people may think that this may be a little rational, that, if it's snowing, what if I can't get my car moved or whatever? Is there any warnings that you'll be giving?
Absolutely. Here's how that works. This ordinance is nothing more than what we used to do in the past. Whether the mayor declared a snow emergency or not, the fact is that if he's on the radio at 3 a.m., if people were sleeping, they weren't going to hear him on the radio either. So the technicality of the mayor having to declare a snow emergency doesn't make any sense. But what happens is either the police department and or the highway garage, when they're plowing, you'll hear a voice over the loudspeaker telling you to move your car, no different than street sweeping. If you come out and move your car, I'm happy, because I don't want to sit there and wait and have to tow a car. I'd rather stay where it's nice and warm in my cruiser and not get out to write a ticket. The fact is that they always use the PA system to notify people, and I'm not sure who hasn't been awakened in the middle of the night by the plow scraping the asphalt. So you're going to hear the plows going past, and you should realize, hey, I should move my car.
And what's your reason for this? To expedite the traffic flow in the city, or?
No, what happened was we had a few citations that the police department wrote, and we lost them at hearings in front of the magistrate, and rightfully so, because according to the old ordinance, the mayor had to declare a snow parking emergency. Well, the mayor shouldn't have to declare a snow emergency for us to be able to enforce the snow parking ban.
Okay, so folks, Ordinance 2012-15 tells you that from October 30th, the end of October,
Correct,
to April 15th, you know, when you see it snowing or anything like that, you need to obey the rules and regulations of the snow parking ban automatically go into effect. Now, I don't know whether I should save 16 for last or we should talk. This is the one that seems to really have a lot of people, you know, particularly downtown Hazleton, people from Fun Fest, really upset, and that's Ordinance 2016, an ordinance requiring permitting for parades, special events, public gatherings in the city of Hazleton. I know that some of the councilmen, one of the councilmen I spoke to is very upset about this because you're going to be taxing, you know, hitting the churches and anybody who wants to raise money for anyone who's sick. You know, he feels that this is not right and this ordinance shouldn't have passed. Now, first of all, let's explain what Ordinance 2012-16 is.
The specific ordinance, as you said, is so that the city can issue permits and or either approve or disapprove if someone wants to have a parade, a special event. For instance, and you had mentioned Fun Fest, that's a special event and a parade. A 5K run, a walk for life, a 10K run, church festivals. When the presidential candidate from the Dominican Republic came to Hazleton and had a parade, the city police have to provide traffic control for the parade. It's gotten to the point where we'll get between 30 and 40 requests for special events where we provide police coverage. The city could no longer afford it. So this ordinance tells people to do one of two things. Figure out a way to not use police services, such as have volunteers to clean up instead of having the highway garage come out and sweep the streets afterwards. Have volunteers park cars and direct traffic instead of having the fire department come and park cars and the police department direct traffic, or pay for the city's services. I don't know how else to explain it easily. The last thing I ever want to do is stop someone's special event or stop a nonprofit from making money. But it can't be at the city's expense anymore because I don't have a budget to afford it, nor can it be at the expense of public safety for the rest of the community. Because for me to put officers on those races, either I'm taking away from policing other neighborhoods or I'm paying overtime to assign somebody to that. The city can't afford it anymore.
Well, Fun Fest seems to be something that is good for the city. It's good for the town. But to punish them, to pay for, well, what does it cost? What's the cost for your services?
And that's interesting.
Hold that thought just a second. Folks, I have to go to break. I'm talking to Chief Frank DeAndrea. I think other than starting so far up to this particular point, there's been a lot of great things happening in the city of Hazleton. As you see, people are starting to pay attention to their properties. They're starting to pay attention to what's happening at the playgrounds. We're going to talk about that a little bit later on in these ordinances. But we'll come back, talk about this Fun Fest thing, which seems to be the real concern, particularly a lot of people downtown here in Hazleton. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us, folks. Sam Lesante here. Atomic and Spring Water. Atomic and Mountain Spring Water, folks, the official water of SSP TV and Samson Productions. If they don't have this water where you buy it, ask for Atomic and Mountain Spring Water. JoJo's on the Beltways carries the water if you want to buy it from JoJo's. And also, folks, yes, every day I'm taking my Mona V. Faithfully, 2 shots every day. Call my good buddy Dan Basala. He'll tell you all about it. My guest today, Chief of Police Frank DeAndrea, talking about the ordinances that were passed on July the 12th at City Council. 3-2, two council people decided they did not want to support the ordinances. Getting back to this particular one with special events, okay, let's talk about Fun Fest, because that's the one that's, you know, they struggle every year, every way to try to make money, at least break out even. Now, what's the cost for the Fun Fest?
Last year, the city police on Sunday during the parade had 19 police officers assigned to Fun Fest. Now, 19 police officers allowed us to have a skeleton crew on the midnight shift of 3 officers and a skeleton crew on the day shift of 3 officers. A couple of things come into play. First of all, is it really fair to the rest of the community that I'll only put 3 cops out on the road on a midnight shift Saturday night or on a day shift Sunday because there's a special event taking place? Because if it's your house that's being burglarized, you're going to say, where are all the cops? You don't want to hear me say, oh, we're all at a parade. So from the public safety standpoint, there's a consideration of where are all your police on straight time. Saturday, there were 9 police officers assigned and working, and we're back to the skeleton crew with people on days off. So overall, you're talking about, in a 2-day span, 28 officers being assigned to Fun Fest. 28 officers calculates to almost $8,000 in straight time salary that the city had to pay to put police officers at someone else's special event. Now, not only Fun Fest. Again, the ordinance isn't specifically Fun Fest. It's any parade special event. So to bring that into perspective, the city will probably end up being asked to do 30 to 40 different special events over the course of a year. That will calculate to anywhere between $16,000 and $20,000.
Okay, let's get back to Fun Fest.
Go ahead.
If you're talking $8,000 it costs the city,
right,
okay, to police or to have cops available, how can they begin to save? I mean, because that's a lot
great.
of money.
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And actually, that's what I'm requesting of City Council, the mayor, and the community to be cognizant of. Because what we agreed to in the ordinance, one of the amendments last night was, if it doesn't cost the city anything, it will not cost you anything for a permit, profit or nonprofit. If you come and say, I'm a nonprofit, I want to have an event, and I don't need police, and I don't need fire, I just need you to approve the plan, and here's how we're going to do it. If it's not going to cost the city anything to provide services, there is no fee to have that event. So it becomes a change in your thinking process. Where the city used to be able to provide services we can't afford to. But that doesn't mean that you can't get special fire police, you can't get volunteers, you can't get other entities that do traffic control to donate, you know, or to charge less, perhaps, than it would to have city police standing on street corners directing traffic. So it will become a thought process of how can we have this event and not involve the police or the fire to the level that we might have had in the past.
So if you're talking about $8,000 it cost the city for Fun Fest,
right,
okay, based on if they were able to get volunteers to police, or let's say an agency in town, Intrepid or whatever, if they would get people to donate people's time to at least protect the different areas, and maybe you just need 5 or 6 policemen,
right,
you know, this is how we could begin to cut down on the expenses?
Sure, but the most important thing is the city police will never charge for police service, which means that if something happens at Fun Fest, we will not charge and say, oh, well, we had to come down there because there was a fight. No, that's police services.
Well, don't you have police service? I mean, any function, I mean, wouldn't there be any cops around anyway? I mean, if there's...
not assigned to the event. Okay. If we have to specifically assign them, they're coming from somewhere else.
Okay.
So what I'm getting at is If we need to respond because something happened, doesn't mean that we won't have officers that stop and walk through Fun Fest anyway.
Yeah.
But to specifically have to assign them to someone's special event means the taxpayers are paying for that.
What about these church events? What about like Mother Grace Picnic,
Right.
Transfiguration, and MPB?
MPB, another perfect example. The fact is that here's MPB. They block off Seibert Street between 5th and 4th. They've done that forever. It doesn't cost the city anything. I'm sure MPB could probably find somebody to give them their own barricades that they don't even need barricades from the city. There's no police officer directing traffic at 5th and Seibert Street. So the next morning, Sunday morning, when they have their procession, my question becomes, do you really need a police car to escort the procession? Because if you do, I have to assign a police officer. If you're comfortable with a regular caution light on top of any other vehicle, no different than a funeral procession or a snowplow truck or anything such as that, there's no cost to the city, so there's no cost to the church. You know, if you could figure out a way to have your event that there's no cost to you. There's no permit fee, there's no security deposit, there will be no fees.
So most of these churches that don't have processions and they just have the events around their church or outside, as long as they don't require you assigning a policeman, there's not even a fee for them to get a permit?
That's correct. They just have to be permitted so the city could verify. We understand what's going on, we know the date it's going on, and we can look at it and say somebody needs to go inspect to make sure it's okay and that it meets the criteria.
Let's move on to ordinance number 17, an ordinance amending the city peace and good order ordinance.
Right.
What's that one about?
That's our curfew. The curfew used to be under 16, 10:30. Now that curfew changed somewhere around 2000, wherever it was, because prior to that, the curfew always was, if you're under 18, you had to be off the streets at 10 o'clock. There used to be an air raid siren on top of the firehouse on Wyoming Street, and at 10 o'clock that siren went off, and the media used to come across the TV and say, it's 10 o'clock, do you know where your children are? I am proposing through this ordinance that we go back to 10 o'clock, all the kids are off the street. The exception to that is if you're over the age of 16 and under the age of 18 and you're coming home from work, you're going somewhere, you're with an adult, your parent, a legal guardian, you're exempt. Otherwise, I don't expect to see kids walking the streets after 10 p.m. That's what that ordinance is.
Playgrounds will also be under this curfew?
Playgrounds is 2012-20.
Okay, just a second. Well, let's get to 18.
Okay.
Placing limitations upon the number of animals that may be kept among the premises.
Right, and that becomes where the city police, code enforcement, and the health department are responding more and more to nuisance calls where there's 20, 30, 40 animals being kept in a house. Not only puppy mills, but just cats running wild. It is no longer, you wouldn't think you needed an ordinance to govern the number of animals, but now we're to the point where we need an ordinance that says you want to have more than 4 cats in your house, come get a permit, let us inspect the house to make sure that you're keeping it clean. If you live on a 5-acre farm, it might be okay to have 20 cats. If you live in a half double, I'm not sure having 20 cats is okay with your neighbor.
Folks, I'm talking to Chief of Police Frank DeAndrea discussing the ordinances. We'll have a quick break. We'll be back right after this. Thanks for staying with us, folks. And once again, folks, thank you so much for making Local News 13. We're up to 80,000 people that watch our news. Could you imagine that every day? Because, you know, we're covering the Tamaqua area, Monterey City, and we added a number of households on. So we are now up to over comfortably 75,000 people watching our news every day. We appreciate that very much. SSPTV.com. Last month, 1.5 million impressions on our website. My guest, Chief of Police Frank DeAndrea. 2 more ordinances left, 19 and 20. Ordinance 19 talks about graffiti and removal of graffiti.
Right, and 19, at my request, I asked City Council last night to table because I need to better spell out the time period. The gist of that ordinance is that if you're a property owner, and it gets spray painted or graffiti tagged by a gang, you have a certain amount of time to get that graffiti off your property. 2 ways. 1, you pay to have it taken off because maybe you want to match the paint perfectly or whatever. 2, if you either choose that you don't care, you have a white fence, we'll paint it white, but you just want it removed, you can request that the city remove it, and if the city incurs any expense, you would then pay the city back. Although it comes off your homeowner's insurance, the fact is that the city will make every attempt to use volunteers and or community service people, as well as donated paint, so there shouldn't be much, if any, expense. But the fact with this ordinance is we need to remove graffiti because graffiti is a gang language.
And we need also to have monitors, cameras out there looking at these playgrounds, looking at what's going on, so we could, once we catch them and we lay the law down to them, we'll begin to see things improving. Correct. The last ordinance, before we talk about the new ones that you're proposing, is Ordinance 20. And what is that?
20 specifically is the curfew on the playgrounds. And that will be an amendment to the current curfew. Right now, the curfew on the playgrounds is 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. And I'm saying 5 a.m. is too early. If I live on James Street or Pine Street or Beach Street, I don't want to hear people playing basketball at 5 a.m. By the letter of the ordinance, they're legal. Also, if it's winter and it gets dark at 4:30 in the evening, why then am I allowed to be on an unlighted playground until 9 o'clock at night? So I'm saying dusk to dawn. We changed the ordinance to say dusk to dawn. When it gets light, you can go play. When it gets dark, get off the playground.
Well, how about these playgrounds that have lights on them, that the people want to play maybe basketball up until 11 o'clock?
Well,
or play tennis.
And that's an excellent point, but the problem is that your recreation cannot be at the expense of not only the rest of the people who live around that playground, but the problem becomes, in trying to be fair and do good police work, who do I stop then? If I let you play basketball or tennis or anything else until 11 o'clock at night, how do I stop the kids from just going on that playground, turning the lights on, and not playing tennis but just sitting there? Either I police everybody or I don't police anybody.
What about the new ordinances you're working on?
Well, in the future, in the next couple of months, I'm working on an ordinance that will govern taxis, transport vehicles, and I'm also working on a secondhand shop or a pawn shop ordinance to try and bring all of these businesses that have popped up in the community into accordance and into compliance with the regulations and some of the laws in the county and the state.
You know, Frank, when you look at all these different things that changes, I think you're having, some people say they may not like them, but however, what they're seeing is their city improving, okay? And I'm sure the two councilmen who, council people who voted no have their reasons for voting no against the ordinances, but I think we have to start somewhere. And you are beginning to see how the city themselves is starting to clean itself up with the quality of life. They're ticketing people. They know they have to take care of their properties. And it's bringing some sense of proud, as we talked about last time.
Absolutely.
Hazleton proud. You got about 30 seconds left. Anything you'd like to tell the residents? In
yeah, I'm actually grateful for you allowing me to voice this on the show, but I love the community involvement and the community support. There was such an outpouring at the meeting last night, both in support of Fun Fest and against the ordinance and supporting the ordinances. And I think that's important. It's not about getting rid of anything. It's about to try and save money and better the community. And I think with that community support, we'll be able to do just that.
Well, when you look at cities like Scranton and you look at San Bernardino, who filed bankruptcy, and we don't want to get into that kind of desperate situation. Folks, my guest is Chief Frank DeAndrea. Remember, we'll be having Chief's Corner starting up very shortly, and we'll have more information for you on a weekly basis. SSPTV.com, 24/7. You can watch the show anywhere in the world. And my email is sam@ssptv.com. We'll see you next time.